They say at 75, life slows down. That you're supposed to be knitting on a porch swing somewhere, sipping sweet tea, with the hardest part of your day being what show to watch before bed. But life doesn't always follow a script. Sometimes, even after half a century of marriage, you're hit with a plot twist so sharp it cuts right through the memories you thought were solid as stone. My name's Eleanor Hartley. Married 51 years to Richard Hartley, the kind of man people called a gentleman. Polished, successful, an insurance man turned entrepreneur. We met when I was 23. I was working the front desk at a doctor's office, and he walked in with a toothache and a crooked smile. That smile carried me through 5 decades, through hard years, beautiful ones, a miscarriage, a cross-country move, 2 children, and more holidays than I can count. He passed away last December. Peacefully in his sleep, just like he always wanted. Grief is a strange companion. It makes tea taste bitter. It slows time. For weeks I walked through the house like a ghost, folding shirts that would never be worn again. But grief also brings paperwork. So many decisions and signatures that you barely have space to feel. The lawyer's name was Clifford. He'd handled Richard's estate for over 20 years. Quiet man, meticulous. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a wedding ring that looked almost too tight for his hand. About a month after the funeral, Clifford called and asked me to come in for the reading of the will. "Just you?" he said, "and one other beneficiary." My stomach dropped, but I didn't ask. Something in his voice told me this wasn't going to be ordinary. That Tuesday, I wore navy blue. Richard always said I looked elegant in navy. I expected to sit down, cry a little, hear about the house, the bank accounts, his antique watch collection. But when I walked into Clifford's office, there she was. A young woman, maybe 30, dark hair, long lashes, manicured nails, tapping on her phone screen like she owned the place. She looked up when I entered and gave me the faintest nod, like I was interrupting something. Clifford cleared his throat, visibly nervous. "Mrs. Hartley, this is Miss Lena Moreau." I blinked. The name meant nothing to me. He gestured for us to sit, then opened a manila folder and began reading. As per the last will and testament of Richard E. Hartley, dated June 15, 2022. I only caught parts of it. My heart was thudding too loud in my ears. But then I heard, "To my wife, Eleanor, the marital home, our lake cottage, and 1/2 of all liquid and real assets." Fair enough. What I expected, more or less. But then came the gut punch. "To Miss Lena Moreau, the remaining half of all liquid and real assets, and a cash gift of $150,000. I stared at Clifford, sure I had misheard. This stranger, this girl, was getting half of everything? Half of the money my husband and I had built together for 5 decades? A young woman I'd never seen at any family gathering, who wasn't a friend of our children, who had never sent so much as a condolence card. Clifford looked up. "There's also a personal letter he left for you, Mrs. Hartley." He handed it to me like it was fragile. It was written in Richard's handwriting. Familiar, steady, but what it said made my hands tremble. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I've gone. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Lena is someone I care deeply for. I never intended for you to find out like this. Please try to understand, and please forgive me. Richard." I folded the letter carefully like it might explode. Lena sat there, lips pressed into a smug little smile like she was the one who had just won. Clifford started mumbling legalese, something about timelines and asset transfers, but I wasn't listening. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't storm out or scream. I simply stood, placed the letter back into the envelope, and turned to Lena. "Well," I said softly, "it seems you knew Richard in a way I didn't. But what neither of you knew is that I'm not the same woman I was 10 years ago." I leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered, "Let's see how this plays out. Pop, I have a few surprises, too." Lena blinked, thrown off balance for the first time, because while they had been busy keeping secrets, I had kept a few of my own. I didn't go home right away after the will reading. I drove aimlessly at first, trying to gather my thoughts. It's funny how you can live your entire life with someone, share toothbrush holders and joint accounts, and still never know the full measure of who they are. Richard had betrayed me, not just with his body, but with his heart. And I think that's what hurt the most. Not that he left something to another woman, but that he loved her enough to carve up our life's work and hand her half of it. But this story isn't about what Richard did. Not entirely. It's about what I did next. You see, while Richard was busy leading a double life, I wasn't sitting around knitting. I'd been doing some thinking of my own. I'd seen signs, business trips that didn't quite add up, a sudden interest in mentorship programs, passwords changed on accounts we used to share. I didn't confront him, not because I was naive, but because I needed to be smart. After all, I've spent my whole life as someone's wife, someone's mother, but I wasn't going to die someone's fool. That's why about 6 years ago, I started quietly moving small amounts of money into a separate account. Not much, just a few hundred here and there. Birthday checks from the kids I never cashed, my modest inheritance from Aunt Cora, even some savings from the antique shop I used to run part-time. And I opened a safety deposit box. Not in both our names, just mine. Inside it, I put more than money. I kept every paper trail that came my way. The receipts from hotel stays he said were conferences, a printed email I'd once found by accident, signed Yours L, and most importantly, a copy of the original will from 3 years ago, the one where I was the sole heir. You see, Richard had updated his will a year and a half ago, but he never thought I'd know about the earlier version. Clifford, the lawyer, had mentioned in passing once, after too much wine at a holiday dinner, that he always advises his clients to retain the original. So I did. I asked for a keepsake copy and tucked it away. Back then, I didn't even know why I was doing it. I just knew. Something didn't sit right. But the biggest surprise of all wasn't even mine. It came in the form of a handwritten note I found in the bottom drawer of Richard's office, taped to the back of an old photo frame. Sloppy. Unlike him, the note was addressed to Lena. "You know the plan. Stay quiet until the paperwork clears. Then we go to the villa and start fresh. I just need to get through the will reading without any drama. Eleanor won't fight it. She never does." Villa? Start fresh? So he wasn't just leaving her half. He was leaving me. Well, Richard underestimated one thing. The Eleanor I used to be, the soft-spoken, polite wife. She died the moment I read that will. So I made some calls, not to Clifford. He was too close to Richard. Instead, I reached out to my lawyer, Kathleen Marsh. Sharp, discreet, and owes me a favor from when I helped her mother into assisted care 5 years ago. I handed her everything. The old will, the receipts, the letter to Lena. She sat back, took her glasses off, and said with the calm of a woman about to change the entire game, "Eleanor, I hope you're ready for a fight, because this is unconscionable misconduct." And with that, we began to prepare for the real will reading, Not the one where I sat quietly while my life was halved and handed off like an afterthought, but the one where the secrets would be aired, publicly, properly. You see, Lena thought she'd won. But what she and Richard never saw coming was that I had been watching, waiting, and planning. Because I may be 75, but I'm no one's placeholder. And the best part? I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make sure they both saw it crumble in front of them. The second reading wasn't supposed to happen. That's the best part. According to Richard's plan, everything was neatly tied up. He died. I'd cry quietly. Lena, the mysterious business associate, would inherit half, and I'd retreat into my little kitchen with my cat and some knitting needles, grateful for the scraps. But Richard didn't factor in that I had stopped being just the wife a long time ago, and he certainly didn't count on Kathleen Marsh. The day of the court-ordered review, we met at the lawyer's office again. Same room, same polished mahogany table. But this time, I didn't come alone or unsure. Kathleen was beside me, her posture straight, her file thick. Lena sat on the other side, legs crossed like she was at a brunch, not realizing she was about to lose everything she thought she'd won. And Clifford, the family lawyer, looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. "Shall we begin?" Kathleen asked smoothly. Clifford cleared his throat. "I'm not sure what this is about, Eleanor. We've already gone over Richard's final will." "I'm contesting it," I said, voice steady, "based on undue influence, deceit, and fraud." Lena scoffed. "Excuse me?" Kathleen opened the folder and slid out the papers like a magician dealing her winning hand. First, the original will from 3 years ago, before Lena ever entered the picture. Then the timeline of Richard's relationship with her, starting much earlier than he claimed, overlapping our marriage, followed by the handwritten note he left behind, outlining his little escape plan. And finally, the receipts. Dozens of hotel stays, wire transfers, jewelry not meant for me. All paid from accounts Richard said were for taxes and business matters. Clifford looked pale. "Eleanor, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I said, because he made sure to keep his secrets neatly compartmentalized. But I'm not here to argue. I'm here to protect what I built alongside that man for over 5 decades, and I'm here to let the court decide if his actions were honest. The shock on Lena's face cracked into rage. "I didn't manipulate him. He loved me. You don't know what your marriage was like. Maybe he didn't love you anymore." I turned to her calmly. "Maybe. But even if he didn't, I didn't deserve to be discarded like a used napkin, not after raising his children, supporting him through 2 cancers, and burying my own dreams so his could live." She stood to storm out, but Kathleen stopped her with a smile. "You might want to hear this next part." Everyone paused. I've also submitted evidence to the probate court suggesting this newer will may have been drafted under coercive conditions. We have cause to freeze all distributions until the investigation is concluded. The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Lena didn't return for the next hearing. Apparently, she didn't like the spotlight unless she was in control of it. A month later, the court formally ruled that the last will was compromised due to undue influence, and restored the original will, the one that left everything to me. Everything. The house, the accounts, the stock portfolio, even the villa in Italy I didn't know we had. But I didn't stop there. I filed a civil claim for emotional damages and fraudulent concealment against Lena. She tried to disappear, but the courts froze her assets while the case moved forward. As for Clifford, I forgave him. He was old school loyal to Richard, and I think this whole thing rattled him to his core. Now let me be clear. I didn't do this because I needed the money. I'm 75. I've had a good life. I've lived simply and been content with less. But I wasn't going to be erased. Not like that. Not after everything. And I had one more surprise no one saw coming. After the ruling, I called my 2 children, Thomas and Rachel. I told them the full truth about their father, about the other woman. It hurt, of course, but they deserved to know. And then I rewrote my will. This time, it wasn't just about dividing money. I left a portion to my grandchildren for education and life-starting funds. I donated part of Richard's precious collection to a museum he never cared about, but always bragged about owning. And the rest? I created a scholarship fund in my name for women over 60 who want to go back to school, start a business, or finally live for themselves. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that women like me spend too long making others comfortable while dimming our own lights. Well, I'm done dimming. Richard thought he was clever, crafting a life in the shadows. But in the end, it was me who stepped into the light. Not bitter, not broken, but reborn. So, to all the women reading this who think it's too late to reclaim your voice, your dignity, your life, I'm 75, and I've never felt more powerful. And that's the real inheritance I leave behind.